Hello, you're on the Ruslan Belov channel. Well then, let's continue analyzing the situation on the Ukrainian front and move on to the map. So friends, over the past 24 hours, we've seen a lot of advances in many different sectors of the front. In the Kharkiv region, on the Siversk direction, near Toretsk, near Kostiantynivka, and even in the Zaporizhzhia region. And the numbers are also good. More than 20 square kilometers have come under control in the last day. Let's begin with the Sumy direction. Along the line of Kondrativka, Alexeyevka, and Yunikivka, the Ukrainian armed forces launched up to 20 counterattacks in a single day. Kiev is pulling reserves into this area, using artillery and drones to try to slow down the advance of the Russian armed forces. Nevertheless, up to half of Yunikivka is now under Russian army control. There is also an advance east of the village in the area of Sadki. The Ukrainian side is complaining, saying that there is a large-scale redeployment of Russian troops near Sumy, while the AFU doesn't even have a minimal defensive line there. However, we're still seeing a significant redeployment of Ukrainian forces in this direction, which means they are thinning out the front elsewhere. Vladimir Putin stated yesterday that it's not out of the question that Sumy could come under Russian control. We don't have the task of taking Sumy, but in principle, I don't rule it out, said the Russian president. It was also reported that Russian forces repelled several attacks on Tetkino and Novi Put in the Kursk region. Let's now move to the Kharkiv region. Remember, in yesterday's episode I told you I had information from guys on the ground about very good progress near Dvorichna. Well now, a day later, it's all confirmed. Even American cartographers have marked this area in solid red, which indicates full control. So, what happened there? The troops managed to advance 3.9 kilometers and reach the village of Dolhenka. Here's the village, and if we look at the topographic map, we'll see that the advance was uphill. Dvorichna is in a lowland, and the road climbs a hill and continues along the ridge. Again, if we look at the elevation map, we see that the village is located on the slope of a hill, and before it, there is another hill that is now under Russian control. This means the Russian forces hold the high ground relative to the village. So I don't think this will drag out for long. Russian troops are likely to move westward toward Vovchansk. I believe that in the very near future, this whole area will come under our control, including the villages of Kutkivka and Redkodub. From our current positions, it's only 3.5 kilometers to Redkodub, and that's directly along a road that runs along a ridge. That gives Russian soldiers a natural tactical advantage. The total area taken under control in this sector is 8.5 square kilometers. A very good result. At the same time, yesterday the AFU attempted a counterattack near Krasny Persha, a village slightly to the north. They tried to sneak through the tree line and break into the village. But the Russian fighters were ready and eliminated them completely. Let's move on. There have also been advances by the Russian army on the Siversk direction, which used to be a dead zone. And now, within a week, we're seeing almost daily progress here. This is a very bad sign for the AFU. If even on such difficult sectors, where we stood still for years, we're now pushing forward effectively, then it's the end for the AFU. Our guys have expanded the control zone in the eastern part of Serebryanka. A significant portion of the village is already under our control, which means we can keep expanding it, especially considering that the key height in this area is already under our control, and from that height we have full visibility and control over the surroundings. So I have no doubt that the entire village will soon come under our control, and the capture of Serebryanka means Siversk should start preparing. But that's not all. We also have some very good news from the Kostiantynivka area. A few more words about the Siversk sector. Why do I say that taking Serebryanka means Siversk should prepare? Because there is a direct road from Serebryanka to the city, that's one. 2. Once the village is under our control, we'll be only 3.5 kilometers from Siversk. That's not much, you have to admit. That doesn't mean we'll immediately move on Siversk after taking Serebryanka. No, we won't. Most likely the effort will shift to clearing out the pocket between Hrihorivka and Verkhnyokamyanske and continuing the push westward from Serebryanka toward Dronivka. But the fact remains, the fall of Serebryanka will worsen the AFU garrison's position in Siversk, as the city will then be threatened from the north as well as the east. I believe the next objective will be Serebryanka, Dronivka, Platonivka, and then cutting the road to the west. In the south, we'll also move toward the Svatovo-Pokrovsky axis. Once that's done, we'll be able to proceed with the capture of the city, since it'll be surrounded from all sides. Let's go further south. Near Toretsk, we had a good advance. Take a look, a 1.7-kilometer push, and the pocket has been cleared. Previously, we had pushed far in the direction of Nelepovka and toward Oleksandr Shultin, creating a large and deep salient. Part of it has now been sealed. The next step is to close it along this line, and then the northern part of Toretsk will be fully secured. Because if we can close it like this, the contact line will move 4 kilometers away from the city. And that's already a major success, since 4 kilometers is an unmanageable distance for the AFU right now. I can't even recall the last time they managed to push a kilometer or even 1.5. 4 kilometers is an impossible distance for them. So from the north, the city will be fully protected from counterattacks. If we can clear out this remaining mess, then Toretsk will be completely secure. As for the movement toward Kostiantynivka, we saw progress in Yablunivka over the past day. I've said this before and will keep repeating. This is the last defensive line from the south, Yablunivka and Oleksandro-Kalinove. Oleksandro-Kalinove is nearly taken. The AFU are only clinging to the northern outskirts. And now we're seeing steady progress in Yablunivka as well. In the past 24 hours, we advanced over a kilometer through the residential area. Let me stress, this is not open field, this is residential terrain. Advancing by a full kilometer in such conditions is a very impressive result. But as you can see, the village is long. Russian troops still have a lot of work ahead. There are another 4.5 kilometers of residential area left. It won't be easy. The AFU are putting up desperate resistance, but once this stronghold is broken, there won't be any serious obstacles left all the way to Kostiantynivka. Now let's go further. On the Novopavlivka direction, in the zone of the Vostok Group, the AFU are failing to stabilize the front near Komar and Podubny. South of this line, Russian forces are advancing on Shevchenko, and today we received confirmation that Russian fighters have already penetrated deep into the village. Even the Ukrainian deep state resource confirms this. There's also very good progress north of Shevchenko. Let me remind you, this area contains a lithium mine with significant reserves. The mine had been purchased by an Australian company that was extracting large quantities of lithium. Estimated reserves, there are 500,000 tons. Now, this deposit will come fully under Russian control. There's also movement northwest of Fedorivka. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that the village of Zaporizhzhia is now fully under Russian army control. Russian forces are advancing toward the outskirts of Yalta and pushing slightly south of these villages toward Peredubov. There is also unexpected good news from the Zaporizhzhia region, specifically from the Huliapol direction. Here, Russian forces managed to completely break through the defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine in the village of Malinivka, fully occupy the entire southern part of the village, and reach its center. Just a moment ago, we talked about how an advance of 1 kilometer in a residential area is a good result. Well, in this case, the advance was 1.7 kilometers, also through residential zones. This event is extremely important because by capturing the village, we reach the highway. And from there, it's a straight road to Huliapol. Considering that we are already near the city from the south, breaking through from the east puts the AFU garrison in Huliapol in a very difficult position. It's one thing to repel attacks from one direction, and quite another when a broad front appears from the opposite side as well. In short, we're seeing gradual progress in the Zaporizhzhia region as well. Hopefully, it will become consistent. To sum up, 22.5 square kilometers came under our control over the past day. This is a result above average. Now, a few words about recent events in the world of politics. Politics is always the art of the possible, and when politicians can't reach an agreement, the guns start talking, writes Yuri Podolyaka. And peace only comes when those very guns manage to remove from the global chessboard the contradictions that prevented politicians from finding compromise. That's what they used to say. Today, instead of cannons, missiles and aircraft are used, but the essence remains the same. And I suggest we view the issue of Iran's nuclear program through this lens. Currently, the main stumbling block in negotiations between the US and Israel on one side and Iran on the other is Tehran's ability to produce weapons-grade uranium at the underground Fordo facility, where Iranian centrifuges are enriching uranium. Iran, having invested everything into this facility, naturally doesn't want to give it up, even under potential strikes from Israel or the US. The logic is that even if they give it up, they won't be left alone anyway. They'll be finished off as the only systemic opponent of the Israeli state in the region. On the other hand, if the US bombs the site, a new layout will be on the table, and it will become much easier to negotiate, unless Washington and Tel Aviv's ambitions grow even more. Given Tehran's uncompromising stance, such a strike is becoming almost inevitable, unless a miracle happens. Only after that might diplomats actually be able to reach an agreement. But there's another possible scenario. What if the American bomb can't reach Iran's centrifuges buried under 100 meters of rock? In that case, Iran's negotiating position will become significantly stronger. And honestly, Iran's logic is understandable. If they accept the US conditions, they'll have to blow up the Fordo facility themselves anyway. This way, at least there's a chance it won't be destroyed. Our sources reported a conflict between Zelensky and Yermak due to failure at the G7 summit. And now a black mark has appeared for the head of the presidential office, writes the Telegram channel Resident. The article in Politico is not just a press leak or an expression of dissatisfaction from the Trump administration. It's a signal of a structural conflict in which Ukraine ceases to be an independent actor and is increasingly seen as a toxic activist in someone else's game. In this story, Yermak is not just a figure next to the president, he's a symbol of systemic failure. Failure in communication, in subordination, and in the hierarchy of trust. The Politico article delivers strong criticism of Yermak, who is the grey cardinal behind Zelensky and has enormous influence over both him and Ukraine's domestic policy. Politico insiders describe Yermak as a bipartisan irritant, and his behavior increasingly threatens already strained relations between Ukraine and the Trump administration at a critical moment. Overall, the article is damning and essentially a black mark. A man who was once invited to summits alongside Zelensky is now being labeled in the US as a liability, a nuisance. Everyone in Ukraine got the message, both about Yermak and about Zelensky. The scandal in the Oval Office is effectively still ongoing. Russia and Iran are fighting the same forces, said Vladimir Putin. The president called provocateurs those who, amid the conflict in the Middle East, claim that Russia is an unreliable ally. He stated that Russia always supports Iran in its peaceful nuclear efforts, not just in words, but in deeds. Russia continues working at the Bushehr nuclear power plant in Iran and has received assurances of safety for its personnel from Netanyahu and Trump. Israel is almost a Russian-speaking country today, yet we've built warm relations with Iran. Russia will not take sides in the Iran-Israel conflict, but it supports Iran, Putin stated. He also noted that the countries of the Global South could potentially play a role in resolving the Middle East conflict. Thank you for watching, my friends. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next updates. Take care and see you in the next report.